All right, and just like that, what is going on, everybody? You are back with us, the Nutrient Health Project podcast. As always, my beautiful wife to my side, Holly Frisch.
Hi.
I am, what's my name?
Andrew Frisch.
Andrew Frisch. There we go. So we are the Frishes, the ambitious Frishes, if you want. So Nutrient Health Project podcast. This is episode number 24. It's crazy to think that we're all the way up to 24, but I know a couple of years from now it'll be like 424. But today we are keeping with the health and hormones series. So we have already covered episode 22. We covered testosterone and estrogen. Episode 23, we covered the thyroid. Now episode 24, drumroll please. I said please. Drumroll please. We're going to cover insulin.
Woo-hoo.
So the last episode, I said that we were going to be covering insulin and cortisol today. But looking at it was like that's going to be like a 3-hour long episode. So and I've had some requests to kind of like make these a little more brief. But we'll see how this one plays out. So it is insulin only today, but we are still bringing the heat. Before we get into the details of the episode, as always, guys, please
leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
I know you know how to do it. I know you can do it. I know it takes 2 seconds to do it. We'll love you forever. You got this. You can do it. So, but no, seriously, we do appreciate every 5-star review. It takes 2 seconds to do it, and it lets us know that we're doing the right things. So, in addition to that, look, like the people that have our phone numbers or message us or that I see in person, excuse me, that are telling us how much they enjoy the podcast and how every episode is getting better than the last. That means the world to us. That puts a smile on my face. It puts a smile on her face. It lets us know that we're doing the right thing. Even if you're not rating and reviewing and all that stuff, we appreciate the feedback. So, but Spotify and Apple Podcasts appreciate the reviews. So, just go do it. Anyways, episode number 24. Like I said, Health and Hormone series. This is episode number 3 of the Health and Hormone series. Talking about insulin today. So we are going to follow kind of the same framework that we did for testosterone and estrogen. So we're going to cover essentially 4 different areas here. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are kind of like the symptoms of high or low insulin levels and high or low blood glucose levels. We're going to talk about number 2, potential causes for those levels, like what things, would cause them to be there. That's what I just said. So, yeah.
We'll also cover what lifestyle factors to address, since lifestyle is a big one when it comes to insulin. And then the last one is the super secret magical unicorn supplements.
Super secret magical unicorns, baby. You know how we get down. So, why are we talking about insulin? Like, in the testosterone and estrogen one, we talked about why those are important. In the thyroid episode, we talked about why is thyroid important. Why is insulin important? Well, having dysregulated insulin levels, so insulin levels that are too high or too low, is a precursor for many of today's kind of like modern health maladies. So I've said, in multiple episodes, I know like the last 2 for sure, talking about how like 88% of I think Western civilization is metabolically unhealthy. So when I bring that up, that 88% of us are metabolically unhealthy, that in a nutshell, like that's heavily related to our insulin levels. So you'll hear us a lot. We're going to talk about, like I said, high and low insulin levels, high and low blood sugar levels. High and low blood sugar levels, that's hypoglycemia, or hyperglycemia, right? Hypo, low blood sugar, hyper, high blood sugar. So when it comes to insulin, if you have low levels of insulin, you're going to have like really good insulin sensitivity. Well, when I say low levels, on a lab marker, if you get your insulin tested, you're going to have really good insulin sensitivity. If you do fasting insulin and it's high, you might have insulin resistance. So we'll actually get into some other markers that you can look at on a lab, on a serum panel, to get an idea of like, possible problematic insulin resistance. So, but I wanted to kind of define really quickly, and a little more than I just did, insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. So insulin sensitivity is basically how sensitive the body's cells are in response to insulin. So the more sensitive your body is to insulin, the quicker your body can clear glucose. So this means that someone with really good insulin sensitivity and someone who does not have very good insulin sensitivity, the person with really good sensitivity could eat a higher carb meal and their blood sugar is going to go up, obviously because of those carbohydrates. And if they have really good insulin sensitivity, their body's going to be very adept at like pulling that glucose out and getting it back to a baseline quicker, right? Whereas the person who doesn't have very good insulin sensitivity, it's just going to take them a little bit longer to get that blood sugar kind of balanced out. So you can see this. Doctors' offices will typically do like an oral glucose tolerance test. You can actually do this at home as well. But if you just take 75 grams of glucose, if you can't get your hands on glucose, dextrose is something I think you could actually get like in the baking aisle. But you basically take 75 grams of glucose or dextrose. You'll mix it up into water, drink it. And then I should have looked at the time limits too, but you're supposed to check your blood sugar. I think it's like every 30 minutes after, 60 minutes after, like 90 minutes and 2 hours. I know I'm butchering that, but basically the idea is you drink 75 grams of like essentially straight sugar water and you test how well does your body remove that. And that's a way to get an idea of what your insulin sensitivity is. On the other end of the spectrum, insulin resistance is basically when your muscle cells, your fat cells, and your liver cells don't respond well to insulin anymore, so they can't easily take up glucose from the bloodstream. This can cause your pancreas to make more insulin to help glucose enter the cells, which results in more insulin resistance, and around we go. And we're actually going to get a little more, really the only sciencey heavy thing that we're going to do today is going to talk about kind of more how insulin resistance happens on the cellular level, because it kind of fascinates me and I think it's kind of cool to learn about. So
this is actually something that we have recent experience in dealing with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So we have, I don't know, most people listen to it rather than watch it, but if you can see the YouTube video of this, got a continuous glucose monitor on my arm. Holly is wearing a long sleeve shirt, but she has one. You can see the outline of it right there. So I had done continuous glucose monitor testing about a year ago, give or take. I mean, it's probably 7-8 months ago, but I had stopped for a while because, I kind of got the initial, the initial knowledge from what I wanted to see. So I kind of stopped doing it for a while. And I think we've mentioned in recent podcasts that like we're trying to figure out kind of what's going on with Holly in terms of her just being like really, really tired, really, really sleepy sometimes. So I had a spare glucose monitor in the house, and for those that don't know, the glucose monitor, it's basically just something. It's a continuous glucose monitor. You just stick it on the back of your, preferably your tricep, and you can just scan it with like the measuring device or scan it with your phone. They are generally good for 2 weeks at a time, 14 days at a time. So I had one left from whatever, like 5 or 6 months ago. And I realized like, well, shit, like we have no way of knowing what's going on with your blood sugar. So if you're open to it, let's put this continuous glucose monitor on. Like I said, that was the last one I had, but I still had a prescription for them. So I went and got, another continuous glucose, another 2 monitors, so we could both be doing it at the same time, kind of tracking it. And I'll talk about kind of how you can get one as well here later on in the episode. But I think it's been an eye-opening thing for her, like it was for me. When I first started doing it, my numbers were actually a little high. I was in the kind of low hundreds to even 110s. And for someone that considers myself extremely healthy, like that's higher than I wanted to be. I want to be in like the 80s and 90s. So, want you to talk a little bit about your experience?
So the first day it was pretty normal. Like it's funny, like it'll show green, but it'll show the number and then it'll show red or whatever.
Green meaning you're in zone,
right.
Red meaning you're either too low or too high.
So the first day it was like all green. It was good. It was fine. And I know Andy said it can take some time to like calibrate.
Yeah.
And, so then ever since then, I found out that apparently I have like consistently low blood sugar a lot of the time. It seems like especially all throughout the night. And then early morning when we wake up, because we wake up at 3, and then later in the evening is when like my blood sugar drops. And I looked up like online of like the low was like 55 to I think it was like 69. Mm-hmm. And mine was getting at times down into the like 43 at one point, and it's been between 43 to 63 a lot, and so it was a lot in the red, and I'm like, it's super eye-opening, and you start to freak out because you're like, oh my god, I didn't even know I had low blood sugar. And I did the thing that I should not do, and I got on Google and started Googling, and I'm like, I started bawling. I'm like, Annie, I'm gonna die. But it's also been very helpful in knowing, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like, there is actually something going on, and it can explain a lot of the things that I'm dealing with, and how that can, in and of itself, is connected to hypothyroidism, and it's just very eye-opening and very helpful.
Yep. Well, and you bring up a couple good points there. One, you talked about how, your numbers are kind of low throughout the night, and you having interrupted sleep has been a very common occurrence. Like,
Right.
You wake up a couple times throughout the night just kind of with your mind racing, and it's like, well, when someone says their mind is racing, you could just, have a lot of stuff on your mind, and you wake up with your mind racing, but it's also, if your blood sugar is dropping too low throughout the night because you didn't get enough food that day, or, you went to bed starving or something. If your blood sugar is dropping during the night, it's going to cause your body to increase cortisol, which will then wake you up because you don't have time to sleep. You've got to get fuel. We're not getting enough. So it's nice to kind of tie that together of like, okay, yes, you are waking up at night, most likely because these low blood sugar levels. And yes, she is not lying that there were 2 mornings in a row where she woke up before me and I came out and at 2 seconds. I mean, when you're with your partner for long enough, their face without having to like really get a feel for what's going on. Like, I could tell she was going to cry. And she was, because she was Googling, low blood sugar levels and thought she was going to die. I was like, no, like this, number one, like, I love you. I'm not going to let you go anywhere. We got this. We'll figure this out. But number two, like, a lot of that will come into terms with like diabetic. If you're type 2 diabetic, then the whole situation changes and things are much more dire. So, I really think, and we'll talk more about this as the podcast goes on, but I really think with Holly, fixing her blood sugar levels is really just a matter of her eating more and more carbs specifically. So the worst thing that's going to happen, which probably for you is almost as bad as death, is like potential weight gain. So we're going to need to like really mitigate that and make sure the resistance training stays in, and we use some of the supplements that we talk about in this episode.
Yeah.
So
enough about us. But what other symptoms could someone be dealing with?
So when it comes to, again, hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, a lot of these symptoms are going to be kind of different, obviously, right? If you have low blood sugar, the symptoms may not be the same as high blood sugar. So there's a little bit of a list here, and shamelessly I stole this from the Mayo Clinic. But so this is, if you have hypoglycemia, these are just a couple of things to rattle off to think that, if you're dealing with some of these, insulin levels might be the cause for it. So, and like I said, we're going to get into symptoms right now, but then we're also going to talk about lab markers and our continuous glucose monitors and kind of start tying some of these things together for you guys. So if you have hypoglycemia, the initial list could be looking pale, which, I mean, our lighting and lack of a tan could do that. But so looking pale, shakiness, sweating, headache, hunger or nausea, irregular or fast heartbeat, fatigue, irritability or anxiety, difficulty concentrating, dizziness or lightheadedness, tingling or numbness of the lips, tongues, or cheeks. As hypoglycemia gets worse, now things can start to look like confusion, unusual behavior, inability to complete like kind of routine tasks, loss of coordination, slurred speech, blurry vision or tunnel vision, nightmares even, or interrupted sleep like we just talked about. And then severe hypoglycemia can actually cause like loss of consciousness and like unresponsiveness or even seizures. So that's when things get really extreme. Hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. So early signs are frequent urination, increased thirst, like you just can't drink enough, blurred vision, and feeling weak or unusually tired. So, and then obviously hyperglycemia, even hypo, but hyperglycemia. So what's going to cause someone to have hyperglycemia? Like what comes to mind for you? High blood sugar is caused by most common response.
Eating too many carbs.
Right. Eating too many carbs. I don't know if you like.
I was going to say obese, but right. Like, yeah.
But So getting too many carbohydrates is a quick way to get hyperglycemia, which again we'll go into more detail here in a second. But the other side of, if you have hyperglycemia for too long, what does that lead to?
Diabetes.
Right. So metabolic syndrome, right? So like hyperglycemia over time will lead to insulin resistance, will lead to like metabolic syndrome, will lead to diabetes. So some of these later signs of hyperglycemia are ones that would like be more common in someone with diabetes. But if you get like fruity smelling breath, if you get dry mouth, abdominal pain, nausea and vomiting, shortness of breath, confusion, and loss of consciousness. So some of them overlap between the low and the high blood sugar, but it's all something to kind of think about, because if you're experiencing some of those beginner stages of hypo or hyperglycemia, then the things that we talk about in this episode, you might want to look a little more into them. So
that's all very concerning. I didn't even know about the fruity smelling breath. That's kind of crazy.
Yep.
So maybe we should take a second to talk about insulin resistance education.
Absolutely. All right. So this is the sciencey part. This is the nerdy part, but this is also extremely effing cool to me. So insulin resistance, again, so your insulin is not functioning as good as it should be, right? It's like your body's response to it is kind of blunted because it's seeing so much insulin. So insulin resistance is essentially a problem of chronic overconsumption of calories, so eating too much, mixed with stressors like physical inactivity, so you're not really doing anything, or poor sleep, or both or more. So essentially you're eating too much and you're not doing enough exercise, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not taking good enough care of yourself. So what happens at the cellular level in insulin resistance is it actually starts at the muscle. So your muscles are responsible for disposing of up to like 70% of the glucose in your bloodstream. But when you have chronic overconsumption of calories, your muscle storage of glucose, which is glycogen, muscle glycogen, with chronic overconsumption, those muscle storages are full. So basically, like when glucose comes through the bloodstream and it's kind of like trying to knock on the door of the muscle to be taken in and added to the muscle glycogen, the muscle's full and that glucose gets turned away and gets sent back to the liver. When it gets back to the liver, it now starts a process called de novo lipogenesis, which is basically just the creation of new free fatty acids, which then, when that de novo lipogenesis happens, the creation of new free fatty acids, your triglyceride levels in your liver will start to go up. Those triglycerides, those free fatty acids, then hit your bloodstream. And when they hit the bloodstream, that then leads to like intracellular buildup of lipids in your bodily tissues. So that means like your muscle tissues, like different tissues in your body are going to start taking those free fatty acids out of the bloodstream, and you can actually start storing fat in your muscle tissues or in other bodily tissues. So this can also lead to new fat cells being created, and the growth or like hypertrophy of already existing fat cells. So, and that's a problem because like obviously you, at least current state of scientific belief is that you can always create new fat cells, but you can't get rid of the ones that you have. I think I've even heard like rumblings of people saying that like if you get fat cells removed, I'm totally pulling this out of my ass right now, but I think if you get fat cells removed by something like why am I totally blanking on?
Liposuction?
Thank you. On liposuction. Like if you get fat cells removed from liposuction, like your body will actually like go in and like remake those and put them there because they're supposed to be there. I could be wrong on that though, but I do believe I've heard that. But so you can create new fat cells, but also if you have this increase in free fatty acids in the bloodstream, your current fat cells are going to get like, think of it like a balloon filling up more and more and more and more. And whereas a balloon will eventually pop, the fat cells that are so saturated, that are so full from free fatty acids, they'll actually start to leak and cause inflammation throughout the body, they'll actually leak out what's called reactive oxygen species. Most people know them or hear about them as free radicals. So these fat cells will actually leak out reactive oxygen species, which then, again, causes more inflammation. And if your body has inflammation, its response is to increase the immune system. So now your immune system is caught up and trying to help blunt what's going on at the fat cells. And now you can start to see how, like, well, if your immune system is activated, that means it's going to start using up other nutrients and vitamin C and magnesium and B vitamins to help. And now you're deficient here, and it's like just this downward spiral. A lot of times I use the kind of analogy of like someone getting into a caloric like over expenditure, a caloric like deficits wanting to come to mind, but that's not the right word. But like it's just like getting credit card debt, where if you get a little bit, it's like, okay, but if you can't afford that payment, then the next payment's higher and higher. And then you have to take out another credit card to pay off the first credit card. And now you've got two bills. And then before you know it, like what was a $400 bill is now, $20,000. I mean, you get the idea though, right? So like caloric debt versus financial debt, it's really the same in terms of burying yourself and the bad things that happen. So
how do we identify the causes of hypo and hyperglycemia?
So essentially, three ways as far as identifying the causes. Number one, like the symptoms can give you clues. So if you notice when I eat meal, number 2 of the day, and I typically have more carbohydrates in there, and I have those more carbohydrates and I just feel like kind of really groggy or I get really tired, that's a sign. Or if you, like, this is one of the reasons why I was thinking it was a blood sugar issue with you, because when I asked you, how do you feel when you get hungry, like in a metabolically healthy person, like you'll get hunger, the sensation of hunger, but then that sensation will kind of like subside because your body knows, again, you're metabolically healthy. The body knows like, hey, hunger. It's kind of like waiting, like, are we going to get any food? No food's coming. Okay, so we need to start tapping into the fat storages.
Right.
So when I asked you how you felt when you got hungry.
Like when I get super hungry, I get really, really queasy, and it doesn't go away until I eat something.
Yep. So, and it's kind of like the body has an inability to access those stored fats. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's starting to ring the alarms, and going back to, I don't even know what episode that was, where we talked about like insulin and the mobilizers. I think that was a podcast. That might have been been a presentation I gave in the last month. I don't know. I get confused with all the content. But so if your body is not able to access the stored fat, then it's going to start releasing, glucagon and cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline to help like start mobilizing some of that. And if you have a spike in adrenaline, that's going to give you that kind of cold, shaky, queasy. So I think that's what you said. You like when I asked you first, you said that you get cold, you get queasy, you get shaky, and it doesn't get better until you eat. So So symptoms can definitely give you clues as far as like hypo or hyperglycemia. Blood work for lab markers, that will definitely give you a snapshot. So the typical ones that you would look to, and we'll go over these again later in the episode, but the typical ones you'll look at when it comes to getting blood work would be fasting insulin, fasting glucose, your A1C, and even your triglyceride to HDL ratio. So fasting insulin and fasting glucose are exactly what it sounds like. You're fasted, you get it measured, kind of sees what what those levels are normally like. Your A1C, I got a yawn coming. The A1C is like an average of your blood sugar levels over the last like 2 to 3 months. And that's basically based on the idea that your red blood cells take like 2 to 3 months to turn over and kind of like become new ones. So they're measuring like, I guess the state of the insulin receptors on those blood cells. I'm out of my element on that, but so that's what A1C does. And then the triglycerides to HDL, if you have a really, really high number of triglycerides and a really low number of HDL particles, and you look at that ratio and say it's like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, the higher that ratio goes, so the higher your triglycerides are in response or in relation to your HDL, the more insulin resistance is a potential likelihood. So, but the blood work, again, it's an initial, it's just a snapshot. The A1C might be a little more exact, but fasting insulin, fasting glucose, you could have a poor night of sleep and it'll affect those. Even if you're fasted but you didn't sleep well, which our last one, we didn't sleep well, but the numbers are still like really good for those. But depending on what you've done in the last 24 to even 48 hours, that can affect your blood work. So the third thing that you can do as far as measuring your blood sugar is what we've been talking about, the like ongoing and real-time data with a continuous glucose monitor, or even just doing like glucose strips and doing like the finger prick deal. The finger prick, like the standard glucose monitor that you've probably seen for decades, I think you can just go to Walmart and buy that off the shelf without even needing anything. The continuous glucose monitors, so like I said, they just, they're supposed to be just on the back of the arm. I'm assuming you could probably do it other places as well. But it's, you hardly notice it. You can take a shower with it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't bother you. Does it hurt at all?
No.
So
it may look scary when you take it out because there's a little needle on the inside.
Yeah, which I made sure to not show her the needle when we were doing it because I knew she'd freak out. But it didn't hurt. But yeah, so the benefit to that is, like I said, it's continuous, right? So you can also get like a little scanner to where you just hold the scanner up to the sensor. But we both just use our phone. If your phone has NFC capabilities, then all you have to do is like hold your phone up to the back of it and scans it. So that way you can also get kind of like 24-hour continuous ongoing scans and get a feeling for what's going on. And plus you're just saving your fingers, because I had a finger prick sensor for ketones that I was doing pretty regularly, probably about 6 years ago. And it gets old, constantly stabbing yourself in the finger. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely try to push for continuous glucose monitors. Go ahead.
I was just say it's also like just really beneficial, and like you could see, like it shows you the graph, so it's constantly monitoring. So even when I don't scan it, you can see what my blood sugar's been doing.
Yep.
So like at night I can see I'm mostly in the red, or like I get hungry all the time. I don't know why. And I'll check it, and like apparently I'm really good at like whenever I have carbs, like it won't take like 30 minutes or an hour, and like mine's back down. Yep. From where I can clear it out quickly.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. If you've been listening to the episode, what does that mean you have then?
I have good insulin sensitivity.
Boom.
Nailed
it. So yeah, you have extremely, and that was the thing. If you remember too, like not only did the nurse practitioner give us like you guys have really good insulin levels, but like even when I posted it in the Facebook group, like trying to figure out what was going on with your energy levels, I think the response was like, you guys have like ridiculously good insulin levels. So and not to make this a competition, but my numbers were better. But
just by a tiny bit, thank you.
But yeah, so yes, that is what's going on. So how do you get a continuous glucose monitor? So you basically a couple options. One, you can have a primary care physician, nurse practitioner, or whatever, write a prescription for you. You do not have to be diabetic to get this. The only time it's a problem is if you're trying to claim it on insurance as diabetic, but you're not diabetic. Don't do that. That's illegal. But you can have someone write the prescription for you and then go and pick it up. Or if you don't want to do the prescription route, there are some direct-to-consumer companies that are doing it. The most prominent out there would be Levels. I definitely like kind of their whole ecosystem and how they're doing it. They give you a lot of information, a lot of kind of cool feedback, and obviously have a lot of good content too. She and I use the prescription continuous glucose monitor. We just get the Freestyle Libre. It might be the Libre 2. I don't know what it is, but just the Freestyle Libre. The prescription, so for the sensors themselves, if anybody's wondering price, the sensors themselves, it's like 70 from Walmart, it's like 74 something. So like $75 will get you a month supply. So you get two-week sensors. So you're basically getting, 28 days of sensing for like the $75. If you were to go And I don't know if there's ways to get it any cheaper than that or not, but that's basically what we're paying every month, and it's definitely worth the data. If you want to go levels, again, you don't need a prescription for it. It's a direct-to-consumer thing, and they do have a lot more features with it. But I just looked up prior to taking the notes for this episode what levels costs, and it's essentially, if this is still accurate, it's like a $200 a year membership, which gives you access to like all of the community content and interactions and posts and all that. So $200 for the membership, and then every month it's a $200 payment for essentially the same, the two-week monitors. So I think when you first sign up, it's an initial like $398 payment, which covers the year membership and then your first month of sensors. And then every month after that, it's another $199. So again, I think that's still accurate. If it's not, take it with a grain of salt. But it's I might use levels at some point in time, but right now we're just doing the old school do-it-yourself prescription-based thugging it. So, so those are the three ways to do it, right? Symptoms, lab work, or continuous glucose monitor, or finger pricks. By being mindful and taking measurements, you can start to kind of piece together your dietary factors, so your food choices, and your lifestyle factors, so your sleep, your stress, things like that are all negatively impacting you. You kind of start to kind of see patterns with everything.
And what affects one person negatively might not affect the next person.
Exactly. So that's a really good point. So basically, the examples of that would be food choices. So there have been studies done that have compared and I might get the food items wrong in this, but I think it was they would have someone eat a banana and then eat almonds. And some people and if I were to just put it out there, bananas carbohydrate, right? Almonds predominantly fats. So you would think that the banana would be the one that would spike the insulin more. And it might have been a cookie and almonds, but either way, it was a carbohydrate source and a fat source. For some people, that carb source did exactly what you would think it would do. It spiked the blood sugar, and the almonds did not. For other people, it was the exact opposite. The banana or the cookie or whatever the carb source was did not spike insulin or as much, but the almonds actually spiked up way higher than they thought they were going to. So food choices are going to respond differently in different people, and that might be I'm totally speculating on this, but that could be a bacterial thing. It could be, genetics. Obviously, genetic heritage might play into it. So, but your food choices are going to vary from person to person. Perceptions of stress, right? So, doing this podcast is, between the two of us, for me, it's super enjoyable, and she enjoys it, but it's also sometimes a stressor, which she's gotten substantially better. But
my introverted self.
Yeah, I was gonna say, compare this to the very first episode, and you're like, oh god, even when I mentioned 2 years ago doing a podcast with me, I think you stopped in your tracks.
No.
So perceptions of stress is going to be totally different, right? One person might just be a type A person, and they're just rocking and smashing everything, and you don't think about it. Whereas the other person is like, "Can I go home yet?" So I'm having a bad mental health day. Can I go home early? Shots fired. Mm-hmm. But your overall predisposition. Are you are you a type A person who you can power through stress and it doesn't really even affect you, or you're better at kind of finding that inner source of calm at all points in times, or are you someone who's a little more kind of high strung and stressed out? These are all things that can kind of affect you, affect your stress, affect your cortisol, and in turn affect your insulin levels. So
in the previous two health and hormones episodes,
if I can interject, I've mentioned it before, but that would be episode number 22, testosterone and estrogen. Go listen to that if you want to. And episode number 23, thyroid health. Shameless self-plugs, but go back and listen to those because I thought they were fire episodes.
That they were. Mm-hmm. But in those, you mentioned the difference between functional ranges and standard reference ranges. So how do those differ? How do those ranges differ when it comes to insulin?
Why am I yawning right at the end of you asked the question? I was good to go and you were starting to finish. And okay, here it comes. So, in case I interrupted you finishing that, you basically just asked what's the difference between the optimal ranges, which I've talked a lot about in episode 22 and episode 23. So go back and listen to those if you're not familiar with it. But basically, when you go get blood work, you're going to get the reference ranges. That's based on like the people that have done the blood work. So you're being compared to like, again, this section, this swath of the population that 88% of them are not healthy. There's optimal ranges that are like ranges that are based on data from actually healthy individuals. So insulin and blood sugar markers are and inflammation markers as well are the ones that have the widest discrepancies between the two. Because if you think about it, someone that's unhealthy, they're probably going to have blood sugar regulation issues, insulin issues, and they're probably also going to have a lot of inflammation going. So when you have a testing set of a lot of people that have a lot of blood sugar issues and a lot of inflammation going on, you're going to have a very wide range. Whereas the healthy individuals, they're not going to have as many blood sugar issues. They're not going to have as much inflammation. So the healthy range on those numbers are much smaller compared to the reference ranges, like the standard reference ranges. It's way, way bigger. So
yeah, again, 88% of us are metabolically unhealthy.
Exactly. So, and these are the markers that like really kind of show the difference between us. So.
So back to episode 17 where we talked about blood sugar. A lot of that episode would be helpful here, so don't be sure to check that out.
Very much so. Nice additional plug.
Yeah. We have a few of those, you know. But for today, what are some lifestyle factors that can improve someone's insulin health?
So, I'm glad you asked. We have a couple of them on here. What do we got? Like 8, 9, I think altogether. So lifestyle factors to take into consideration that some people don't always think about. I think most people don't always think about when it comes to your insulin health. It's not just about carbohydrates, right? As we've somewhat alluded to. So number one, first and foremost thing, sleep. It's not sexy. It doesn't sell a ton of books. It's not a supplement you can buy. You can buy supplements to help you with sleep, but
it's magical.
It is. Sleep is magical. I actually saw. Shout out to Eric Bach on my Facebook friends list. He made a post saying that, I'm going to butcher some of the details of this, but it was a weight loss study where they had two groups of people. I don't know what all the details of it was, like a dietary weight loss or like training weight loss or both, but two groups of people. They lost the same amount of weight, but the sleep deprived group in that study, I think it was 60% more muscle that they lost. So if you think about that, like, what does that really mean? That means the group that got sleep lost the same amount of weight, but it was fat predominantly that they lost. Whereas the group that didn't get much sleep lost the same amount of weight, but they also lost a lot of muscle. And you do not want to lose
your gains.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your gains, but you don't want to lose muscle. Like, fat is an inflammatory tissue on your body that you want to get rid of if you want long-term health. Muscle is something that's going to help you be metabolically active and healthy for a long time, for years to come. So sleep is critical in terms of balancing your blood sugar. Like, just a couple bad nights of sleep can really wreck you. Like, I mean, going back to episode 22, like, it'll wreck your testosterone. It'll decrease your insulin sensitivity. It'll increase your cortisol, just all the way across. So get sleep as a priority. If your sleep is not fixed, like, all of this other stuff might help a little bit, but if your sleep is still out of whack, like, that should be your number one primary focus, no matter what. So, and like she said, we get up at 3 a.m, and we've tried, and I still on occasion do, just because I can't, I want to. It's not that I can't go to bed. Like, I don't want to go to bed. I want to keep learning. I want to keep reading. I want to keep going. Obviously I was a shithead kid growing up because I never wanted to go to bed. Still, as a 44-year-old adult, that's the same thing. But because we get up at 3 a.m, we still aim to be in bed by like 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, because that sleep is critical. So, number 2, meal timing. So there are some studies out there, some books out there that suggest your insulin works more efficiently earlier in the day when the sun is up and it's daytime versus sun's gone down and it's getting dark outside. That because melatonin, I think, has a regulatory effect on insulin. So basically, like, melatonin comes out and kind of like starts to blunt insulin's job. I don't understand that well enough to go into deep detail on that, but I will say that eating earlier in the day, your body is better equipped to utilize the insulin versus later in the day. So meal timing is huge. Number 3 on that same kind of level, time restricted eating. So you might know this as intermittent fasting. I get a lot of questions about this. It's something that she and I practice from time to time. But it's just like anything else. Too much of it can be a problem. But so time restricted eating, basically, if someone's not familiar, that's you're just, instead of like the average American eats 16 hours a day, we eat from the time we get up to the time we go to bed, right? Kind of all throughout the day. Time restricted eating is just what it sounds like. You're kind of shutting that 16-hour window. You're shrinking it to maybe more like a 14-hour, 12-hour, 10-hour, 8-hour eating window, and you're trying to extend the time that you're not eating. So when it comes to the studies that they've done with time restricted eating, if you are an unhealthy individual, you actually stand to benefit the most from restricting your feeding. There's actually a really good book called The Circadian Code by a doctor named Sachin Panda. And his lab has put out a lot of different studies on this, but it basically shows that like if you can just get even just down to a 12-hour window of eating, that shows benefits. And they've done studies with groups. I should have pulled up the book so I could show some of the highlights from it, but they've done studies with people, and like if calories are kept the same across two groups, so both groups are eating the same, but one group's eating all day long and the other group like stops, so they're basically eating more food in a same amount of food but like in a smaller window, right? So you're condensing it so it feels like more food. But even though both groups are eating the same amount of calories, the group that stops eating earlier and does that restricted feeding actually loses weight and their health markers improve because they're not eating all day long. So that's where there was this big thing 5-10 years ago about like eat 5 to 6 to 7 small meals throughout the day. It's not to say that you can't do that, but if you are a metabolically unhealthy individual who is struggling with insulin issues, you probably don't want to be eating like several small meals throughout the day. You want to probably focus on that time restricted eating. So if you're a healthy individual, there are still some benefits to be had, but it's just not as beneficial as someone who is metabolically unfit. So I don't want to read this whole list by myself. You want to go ahead and read number 4 and 5?
Sure. Exercise, specifically resistance training.
Mm-hmm. Why is that important?
It helps you burn muscle. Not burn
Helps you
muscle.
burn muscle.
Helps you burn fat, even
Right.
when you're not working out.
Well, so going back to glucose or muscles being responsible for the removal of about 70% of the glucose in your bloodstream, resistance training directly impacts that. So doing resistance training is like specifically the best way to pull glucose from the bloodstream into the muscles. So.
And then number 5 is activity. So like 10-minute walks.
Yep.
I know you've mentioned before like a 10-minute walk after you eat is like shown great benefits, great health benefits.
Yep. I think that the study was showing that like a 10-minute walk was as effective as metformin at controlling blood sugar, like leveling off that blood sugar spike. So, and I actually saw something just super quick from somebody else in the fitness space saying that there was even a study that showed 2-minute walks actually show benefit too. It doesn't even have to be 10 minutes. So like just move, get up and move. So that's number 4 and 5. Number 6, lose weight, because again, fat is inflammatory, right? So, and like I said, if you have fat cells that are so full that they're starting to kind of like spill out reactive oxygen species and sending out, all of these like adipokines and like inflammatory markers, losing weight is one of the best things you can do to help, your body operate in a healthier state. So, number 7, watch your carbohydrate intake. I feel like this is probably the one that everybody would have an idea of, but a little more on the detail side with this. So watch the carbohydrate intake, but basically like sugars, first and foremost, I would, if I were someone who has blood sugar issues and you're trying to get your insulin in check, then like sugars first and foremost would be the first thing I would drop. I would kick those out and really make a push to kind of add fiber and protein to meals if you're not already, because you're basically trying to, if you do a carb only meal, you're basically giving your body like fuel, but also it's there's nothing slowing down that digestion. If you have a piece of bread or what's something else, like a cup of rice or a banana or something like that, you're not giving your body, your digestive system, anything to slow down that absorption of that carbohydrate. right? So that's where you'd want to add, like I said, fiber. That could be, you're having a piece of bread. If we're going to keep that horrible example, you're having a piece of bread, and you want to just like have a handful of almonds with it. Those almonds will have some fiber. It'll slow it down. Vegetables, some carrots, right? Protein shake, chicken breast. I mean, just
something.
Yeah, just something,
Colon
right?
Fury.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's a fiber powder that we use. Well, the GNC brand of it. So Psyllium husk powder, which we'll talk about at the very end here. Psyllium husk powder is a fiber, and again, adding fiber will help slow down the digestion of it. Slow down the digestion of carbohydrates, which will help slow and mitigate such a big such a big bump. Now you got me flustered. It'll mitigate having such a big bump from just the carbohydrate by itself. We got a GNC brand when we used to shop at GNC. I haven't been to that place in a long time, but the psyllium husk from GNC was called Colon Pure, and there was an old friend of mine who we were talking about it, and he thought I said Colon Fury. So it's been like this ongoing kind of inside joke about Colon Fury, because if you have enough of it, it definitely will give you some Colon Fury. So yeah, adding fiber to meals will definitely help. Lastly, on the carb side of stuff, there's kind of this debate on, is fruit healthy or is it not healthy? And one of my current mentors, I've mentioned him in other podcasts, Sam Miller, just put out, it gets deep in the weeds, but he put out a couple episodes back, an episode on fructose, and it was really cool, really eye-opening. I nerded out to it, and I want to listen to it a couple more times to take more notes from it. But basically, like, fruit for a healthy individual is going to be, I'm way simplifying this, but for a healthy individual, fruit is a beneficial thing. It's not going to really hurt you. If you're unhealthy, your body's not going to be very good at processing that fruit, and it might be a problem. And if you remember, actually, yesterday we just went out, day before, 2 days ago, we went out to eat, and your dad, who is on the borderline of type 2 diabetes, right? Has he been diagnosed with metabolic syndrome? They say he's getting close.
I know he's pre-diabetic.
So he mentioned to you when we were talking about the whole blood sugar thing, like asked like how much fruit you're eating. Yeah. Kind of like, as like a, well, you shouldn't be eating fruit. And it's like, but you should. Like, you should be eating fruit. I
never hardly eat fruit.
Yeah. So fruit basically is really going to depend on if you're a healthy individual or an unhealthy individual. The last two, I've already mentioned a little bit here and there, but so number 8 on this list would be stress management. And this, when we do next week's episode, episode 25 on cortisol, the impact that stress and inflammation has in your body and how it increases your insulin levels, blood sugar levels, will make a lot more sense. But stress management, in what we're talking about here, going back to testosterone and estrogen, thyroid, like all of these hormonal systems are going to act completely different in the presence of chronic stress versus how they would if you were just a healthy individual who has like maybe a modest or healthy amount of stress. So stress management is huge when it comes to like healthy blood sugar levels, balancing out your insulin. So again, improve sleep stress, right? That's one thing that people don't think about stress. They think, I'm stressed out at work. Well, how's your sleep? I sleep like shit. Well, that's another stressor. Like, you have to think about that. Ways you can improve your stress, like stress management, meditating, journaling, like quiet time just to introspect. Like, this is something too to think about. How often, when's the last time that you just sat quietly with your own thoughts, right? We've either got music playing or TVs in the background or talk radio or podcasts, or we're talking to other people. Like the amount of time per day, how many minutes per day do you actually get to like quietly sit down and think about shit? If you're not getting that quiet time with yourself, how can you ever hope to kind of like process your own thoughts? And if you're trying to be able to be like more resilient in the face of stress, one of the most important things you can do is process your own thoughts and focus on building resilience. So, because again, like stress management, one of the best things you can do is become more resilient. If you're tougher, stress isn't going to hit you quite as hard. So I would say become more resilient and or make those difficult choices to like reduce life stress. So what I mean by that is if you're working a job that you hate, it's a soul-sucking job, and you feel like you're making just enough money to like quit, but not so much that you can go do your own thing. Like it's tough. And I don't want to just say suck it up, buttercup, and like go find a different job. Like you've got to get out of that because it's not going to get any better. And this is like it's a recurring thing that I talk about like with me and her and clients is like it's not, no matter what the hell you're trying to do, it's not going to get easier the longer you wait, right? And if you want to do it sooner or later, like why not do it now? Why wait? So go do it. So make those tough life choices. Sometimes that looks like, you know, kicking somebody that's just like a stressor that's been in your circle for a long time. Like, I mean, you got to do what you have to do to make your life healthier and happier. So, and then finally on this list, reduce inflammation. So that could be, again, stress would cause inflammation. So that's kind of, those things kind of are hand in hand, but you could also reduce inflammation from your dietary choices. So reducing liquid sugar, you know, reducing foods that don't agree with you. So diet is a huge way that you can reduce inflammation. Your gut health, just improving like your bacteria, diversity of diet, more vegetables, even including things like glutamine, which we need to do a gut health episode. That's something I definitely want to put on the board soon. So I was thinking about where we were going to go after cortisol. So we might go gut health or inflammation. We'll see. But so you can reduce inflammation by improving your diet, by improving your gut health, by, again, stress management. Those things are intertwined. And then weight loss, because, again, fat is an inflammatory tissue. So losing weight will also help you reduce inflammation. Reducing inflammation will help you balance blood sugar levels.
Well, I know for me, getting carbs is very important.
Correct. And that's because you and I are on the opposite end of the insulin spectrum. So everything I just talked about for the most part was like someone who has high blood sugar, high insulin levels. So the flip side of that is insulin levels are too low. Like I said, I think yours, was a 2.6, and I want to say mine was a 1 point something.
Yeah.
Like stupidly low.
Yeah.
So, but like, just like most things in life, it's a spectrum. So it's not good to be on one end of the spectrum or the other, right? Having ridiculously low insulin levels, that's not great. So at least for chronic like exposure to it. So it is important. That's when you started showing me your blood sugar and how like low it was getting. What have we done? What's the one thing we've been doing?
Eating more carbs.
Right. Just eat more carbs, right? Every time you tell me your blood sugar's low or you're tired or you're hungry, I'm like, fuck, go eat.
Yeah.
Go get some food. Go get some carbs. So, but that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet, because we're still trying to figure out, like, it's the thyroid that's causing this. And, like, I want you to balance out the blood sugar, but I also don't want that to come at the price of you putting on, you know, even like 5 pounds. Yeah. So we're trying to do this very small, slight, and tediously.
Yeah.
So we still have work and measurements to do.
So what about the super secret rainbow unicorn supplements?
That's probably the best read you've ever done. Super secret rainbow unicorn supplements. So, again, these are primarily for people that have high insulin levels and high glucose levels. If you are someone who has low insulin levels, low blood glucose levels, then, like, and you're not at risk for insulin resistance, then I would say have more carbohydrates. When you get your blood work too, you'll know, like, if your insulin is low, look at something called your sex hormone binding globulin, or SHBG. If insulin is really low, SHBG is probably going to be really high. If SHBG is really high, because, again, the name, we talked about this in episode 22 on the testosterone, but if sex hormone binding globulin is high, that means it's going in and binding up testosterone in the bloodstream and pulling it out of circulation. So by increasing carbohydrates, if you're low insulin, by increasing carbohydrates, you will increase insulin levels. By doing that, you will decrease sex hormone binding globulin, and you will increase your free testosterone in the bloodstream. So, I'll just leave that there. So all of these are for people with high insulin, because, again, low insulin have more carbohydrates. So if you have high insulin, there are a few like base micronutrients that you want to get that will help with that, and those basically being ones that you'll hear me rattle off all of the time: magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin K2, and zinc. So I think magnesium and vitamin C specifically are like directly involved in the breakdown of carbohydrates. So, but those four again: magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin K2, and zinc. Those are all important to get if you're high on the insulin side of things. Number two, chromium. So chromium is a nutrient, and it's typically marketed to help kind of control cravings, especially like carb cravings. But chromium is something that will help. If you are wondering what kind of chromium is the best to get, look for chromium nicotinate. I think I'm saying that right. Yeah, nicotinate. That's preferred, but chromium picolinate is also okay. So a few of these other ones we've talked about. This goes back to episode number 17 as far as the blood sugar, but other ones that will help control blood sugar, which will then help control insulin. Alpha lipoic acid is a really, really common one. And every time I bring that up, I also talk about how I love it because it helps chelate heavy metals from the brain. So basically, like, it can help pull heavy metals that might be stored in brain tissue out of there because that's not where they belong. So number 4, berberine. So berberine, I actually just learned this within the last week or so. Berberine is something that, like, its benefits kind of build up over time. So I know you get some benefit, I think, from like a chronic or acute usage of it, but really it helps you like over time. So berberine, if anybody's unfamiliar with berberine, it's kind of like a plant version of metformin and has fewer side effects, and it's a lot easier on the gut than compared to metformin. Number 5, Holly.
Nema Sylvester. I don't know.
Please say that again. Say it just like that.
Nema Sylvester.
God, I love you, woman. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I would say it. So, Gymnema Silvestri. If you can't see my screen, if you are watching the video, so the way you spell that, the first word is Gymnema, 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 and then the second is Silvestri, Sylvestre. So that is also a common kind of blood sugar balancing one. Mm-hmm. Another really common one, number 6, bitter melon extract. That's in a lot of like blood glucose disposal agent mixtures and things like that. One that you take on an almost daily basis. I know you can say that one. Benfotiamine. So benfotiamine is just basically a more absorbable form of thiamine, which is vitamin B1. That is also a lot of the B vitamins. Actually, I should have put that on here as just as a whole. But B vitamins are critical in your body as far as like energy maintenance, nervous system function. Like your body's usage of carbohydrates. But benfotiamine, so Ben like the first name, and then so BENFO, Frank like F, Frank as an F. Jesus, let me start that over. BENF as in Frank, OTIAMINE, benfotiamine. That will help with energy, and it will also help with blood sugar levels. So, which, as I'm saying that, like I said, you take it every day. I got it for you for energy. Mm-hmm. But if low blood sugar is your issue, and that helps balance out high blood sugar, maybe I need to cut the benfotiamine from your diet, or maybe like every other day and see how it impacts you. I actually was thinking about that when I was writing the notes for it. I was like, son of a bitch, and she takes that every day. Number 8, we've got maitake mushrooms. Number 9, cinnamon.
Really good on oatmeal too.
Yep. And as she told me, Mama loves her cinnamon. So cinnamon is something that you could put on pretty much everything, and it does help, small level of blood sugar balancing. Number 10, so apple cider vinegar, having just a little bit, like a shot of it before a meal can actually help blunt blood sugar response. And then the last one,
fiber powder.
Yep. So that would be the psyllium husk. I mean, when it comes to fiber powder, there are tons of, well, not tons, but you have several options out there. There's like guar gum, psyllium husk, I'm drawing up like, I think pectin, like a fruit fiber, inulin. So you have different types of fibers. I think guar gum and psyllium husk are the most common. And from my experience, psyllium husk seems to be the best one. It's like a good, like, kind of bulking agent, if you will. And specifically our recipe, the way I do it for us is we're both sweet potato fiends. So I will measure out however many ounces of sweet potatoes for both of us. And then, well, I used to do 2 tablespoons of the fiber powder for both of us. I got down regulated to 1 for her.
Yeah.
So
it was a little too much for my wee little self.
She called a veto on that, or she overpowered it. But so the recipe is basically sweet potatoes, 1 to 2 tablespoons of that fiber powder, and then like 2 scoops of a protein powder. So right now I've been experimenting with a pumpkin pie flavored protein powder. You've done it with the salted caramel and chocolate brownies, right? So speaking of, anybody listening to this that is looking for a good source of protein powders, go to myprotein.com. I have an affiliate link, but I can't give you the affiliate link over the interwebs here. But myprotein.com is like the best place that we've been able to find as far as like flavors, cost, delivered quickly. So
the amount you get for the price is insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we get like routinely. We're digressing right now, but like we get routinely like 15 and like 19 pounds of protein, and it'll be like $100.
Yeah.
So $120.
Yeah.
So myprotein.com is awesome. But yeah, so fiber powder would be the last one, guys, on that. So again, the whole list from top to bottom. We got number 1, those base micronutrients: magnesium, vitamin C, K2, zinc. Number 2, chromium. Number 3, alpha lipoic acid. Number 4, berberine. Number 5,
Dyneema sylvester.
Yep. Number 6, bitter melon extract. Number 7, benfotiamine. Number 8, maitake mushroom. Number 9, cinnamon. Number 10, apple cider vinegar. Number 11, fiber powder. And I'll throw a number 12 on here too. If you get on Amazon and search GDA, glucose disposal agent, there are some different supplements that like come as a mix that have some of these ingredients already in there, and they might even have some additional ones. So look for GDAs, glucose disposal agents. That's another way that you can kind of help. You basically take it with a meal, with a high carb meal, and it'll help kind of balance out your blood sugar response. So
I'm glad we have a lot of those on hand.
that we do.
But any other words of wisdom, sir?
Yes, as always. So same as last week, guys. Basically, just like I want to make a plea to everyone listening to get regular blood work done. This is something that she and I were not the best at until recently. But like the reason being is it's super common for us to work with someone like over the age of 35 who kind of fits this profile, right? It's like chronic dieter, chronic exerciser, eats clean, trying to lose weight. They think they're doing everything right, but they're actually like chronically underfed. Stress is high, inflammation is high, insulin resistance may be creeping up, even if they're avoiding carbohydrates like they're the plague. So like getting blood work done routinely will give you kind of like, yes, snapshots, but like also like kind of a whole picture of what's going on in your body, and at least gives you a direction to go instead of just like, and just kind of like throwing shit against the wall hoping it sticks. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned it earlier, but I said I was going to come back to it. So if you're getting blood work done and you're curious about your insulin health, the ones I would really recommend: fasting insulin, fasting glucose, your A1C, and then look at that triglycerides to HDL ratio. So like I said earlier, like the higher your triglycerides are and the lower your HDLs are, that ratio is going to be higher. Right now you're looking at like a 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 ratio. As that ratio goes higher, you're becoming more and more likely to have insulin resistance. So, and as you get closer to insulin resistance, you get closer to type 2 diabetes. And that is one of those things where it's like, you know, you don't want to cross that threshold. So take this shit serious. If your doctor's not going to cooperate, you can order these tests online from places like Quest Diagnostics. Thankfully, it's the year 2022, and we can finally start to take our own health into our own hands. So, and again, I mentioned it last week, but ultimately, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. You have to know what's going on inside your own body. So
I think it's so fascinating, like how awesome the body is. Yep. And I know, like we were kind of talking about this just the other day, and how cool, like how resilient our bodies can be. But at the same time, how everything's so interconnected and has to be like balanced.
Yep. So. Yeah, and you said that I think when we were walking. I remember we were probably talking about all of this, and you kind of had that epiphany about just how it's cool that like we're just so resilient as you know, human beings. But it's like everything depends. It's all a big interconnected like ecosystem, right? I used to use the analogy of like our guts being like the rainforest, in that like you have different bacteria that relies on different other bacteria in your gut, but it's like you could use that exact same analogy for just like body-wide, system-wide organs.
Right.
right? So I thought it was really cool when you had that epiphany. So, but yeah, it's a very true story. This is why I geek out to all of this shit. So the more connections I make and the more I learn, the more I'm like, oh wait, this fits here, and the more I can see that puzzle, it's like the more I want to get a bigger puzzle and keep kind of going and keep putting pieces into the puzzle. So I just kind of want to keep going and finding more answers. So,
Ain't that the truth?
Yep. So next week, guys, like I said, episode number 25, will we be back with we will be back with episode number 25 covering cortisol and how to lower it and why you don't want it to be high and all that fun shit. So if you have any questions, as usual, guys, please send them to NutrientPodcast@gmail.com. Again, all one word, NutrientPodcast@gmail.com. Send us a message through Spotify. Find us on Facebook, on Instagrams, whatever, Nutrient_official. I think I'm all talked out. I think that's all I got.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys. We love you. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Later.